Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Kaplan. I am really looking forward to our project today. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to be using our skills in illustration and typography and portraiture to make a poster design that's inspired by a project called the Celebrate People's History Project. What we're going to be doing is making a design for a poster about a person who inspires you. And that could be a person from history, maybe someone from the present, and maybe it could also be a person in your life, like a family or a community member. What we're going to do first is we're going to look at some inspiration and learn a little bit more about the Celebrate People's History project. So this is a project that is organized and curated by an artist named Josh McPhee. And here's a little bit about what he says about the project. The Celebrate People's History posters are rooted in the do-it-yourself tradition of mass-produced and distributed political propaganda, but determined to embody the principles of democracy, inclusion, and group participation in the writing and interpretation of history. It's rare today that a political poster is celebratory, and when it is almost always focuses on a small canon of male individuals, MLK, Gandhi, Che, or Mandela. Rather than create another exclusive set of heroes, I've generated a diverse set of posters that bring to life successful moments in the history of social justice struggles. To that end, I've asked artists and designers to find events, groups, and people who have moved forward the collective struggle of humanity to create a more equitable and just world. The posters tell stories from the subjective position of the artists and are often the stories of underdogs, those written out of history. The goal of this project is not to tell a definitive history, but to suggest a new relationship to the past. There have been almost 100 different artists who've made posters for this project, and each poster is made by a different artist. They're really interesting to look at because of all the different styles that the artists use, right? Each artist has their very own individual type of style. Some artists choose to make their posters about a particular person, like this poster you see here of John Brown. And some artists might like to make their poster about, an event in history or a movement in time or something maybe that's going on in the present. So you can see these posters here are representing two different times that happened, two different kind of activist movements, right? It's important for us to celebrate heroes in our community and to make sure the history that we think is important is recorded and celebrated. Art is a great way to do this because it's super eye-catching and draws you in. Think about if you're using Instagram, right? Would you be more focused on a picture that comes through your feed that's really beautiful and has lots of eye-catching colors and designs? Or would you rather, stop scrolling to look at just a plain block of words, right? So art can be really powerful, right? Because it catches people's attention. And what I want you to start thinking about for this project is to celebrate the history that you think is important and that you think should be remembered. One thing that we're going to be doing during this project is working with portraiture. And so what portraiture is, it's when you do a drawing or a painting of a person, right? Usually of the person's face, but it can also be their whole body. So some questions we want to think about when we're working with portraits are, what can or should a portrait show about an individual or a group of people? Can the portrait show the subject's personality, work, value, and skills? Do some portraits fight against stereotypes or societal values? Do some reinforce them? How does the medium the portrait is created in reinforce the message? Can we as artists use our skills to record and elevate the history that we think should be remembered? One thing that's really awesome, I think, especially in these posters, is you can do a really simple drawing. That's just a very simple line drawing in your portrait, and it can still be very powerful. You see this poster here of Muhammad Ali. The lines are drawn very simply. It's not a very complex drawing, right? The one next to it is almost realistic, but they're both very powerful and they're both very expressive. And your individual voice as an artist is important, right? I really don't want you to focus when you're making these on making sure that the portrait looks exactly like the person and is photorealistic. It doesn't need to look like a photograph. What's more important is that you're expressing your individual style. Also, in this other poster on the side here, you can see that this person has chosen not just to do the head of the person, but to do the full body. And that's something that you can do too. And thinking about the pose or what the person is holding, what's in the background, can also be very important when you're thinking about your poster design. The posters that we're making can be broken down into four kind of really basic parts, right? The main portrait of the person's name, any words you'd like to add about them, or maybe a quote that you'd like to have, a quote from them, and then any background colors or drawings or images. So you can see in this poster, this artist decided to put the person's name at the top, Bayard Rustin, to have his portrait in the center, and then in the background, kind of a building. And then the text, I feel, is done really interesting in this print. You can see the text actually is coming kind of off of his tie. And it is kind of challenging to read, but the way that it's written, kind of coming off the tie, really draws you in and makes you want to read kind of what it's saying, right? So the way that we arrange these kind of four basic elements, these four parts on the paper in our drawing, that's called the composition, and that's an art term. So composition in art is the arrangements of elements in a work of art. The basic elements of art and design are line, shape, color, value, texture, form, and space. Elements that affect composition are balance, movement, unity, rhythm, focus, contrast, pattern, and proportion. Now, I know that's a lot of words to kind of think about, right? But let's talk about some of them while we look at this poster of Annie Diggs here on the side. So if we think about focus, right? If we look at this poster, what do we see as kind of the main focus? If I look at it, I think that the portrait of her is the main focus, right? Her face is right in the center. And there's also some other elements that kind of frame it, right? She's got that yellow shape behind her that kind of leads the eye into the center. There's also these beautiful kind of swirling grains of wheat that come up along the sides. They add movement and they really lead the eye towards the center. The composition also in this is very balanced, right? It's very symmetrical. We have the main portrait in the center and then the two circles at the top. So that creates kind of a balanced composition. That's just a way to kind of look at a poster and think about composition. There's lots and lots of other things that are going to help you create a really good composition when you're making your design. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go ahead and get started on designing our posters. To begin this project, all you will need is a pencil and a piece of paper, or you can work in your sketchbook. So the steps that we're going to do for the first part of the project are research and brainstorming. So that's our first step. First, we have to figure out who we want to make our poster about. Do we want to make our poster about a family member or a community member who we think does great stuff? Maybe we want to make it about a celebrity or a sports star who we think really lets their voice be heard. Maybe there's somebody from history. Maybe we haven't even figured out who we want to do it about yet. You can always do a little bit of research, whether you use books or the internet or whatever way you like to do research. While we're doing our research, trying to figure out who we want to make our poster about, we can also begin brainstorming ideas. So brainstorming is a really great way to generate ideas. It encourages people to come up with ideas that they may not have think of. And the way that we brainstorm is by writing down as many ideas as we can think of, even if we think they might be weird, because one idea might lead you into another that might be the final idea that you choose. So when I brainstorm, what I like to do is I like to just grab a pencil or a pen, and I like to work in my sketchbook and just make a list of any ideas that I can come up with. So maybe if I know I want to make my poster about, maybe I'll think, okay, so maybe I want to make my poster about Sylvia Rivera. Maybe I want to make it about Marsha P. Johnson. And I'll just make a list of people, right? Make a list of people I might want to make my poster about. Maybe I want to make it about Muhammad Ali. Once I start making this list, then I can say, all right, so I think I want to make my poster about Sylvia Rivera. So what do I want to have in my poster? Let's see. So I can just continue to make a list. Maybe I want to put her, maybe I want just her face. Or maybe I want to do her holding a protest sign. Maybe I want to have her holding a rose. And just making any list, even if I know I don't want to have her holding a rose, it's good to write it down. Like I said, even if you think the ideas when you're brainstorming might not be the one that you want to choose, just go ahead and write down as many ideas as you can, a really long list. And then you can go through and circle the ones that you like and the ones that you want to use. The next step for this process, after we do our research and do our brainstorming, is we want to think about who the person is. Who are they? What did they do? Or what do they do? What did they say? Why are they special? This is what we're thinking about when we're thinking about how we want the person to look in the drawing, or maybe what we want to say about them. You can write your own text that you want, describing kind of what the person did or why they're important. And you can also, maybe you want to use a quote that they said. So you could come up with a quote, look online and see if you can find a quote. Maybe if it's someone in your life, you can ask them, a quote that they think is important, and you can add that quote to your poster. So after we think about that, we'll decide on what we want our text to be. So you'll write out your text. So I think I decided that I want my text to be, well, I definitely want to have her name at the top. So I would want my text to be Sylvia Rivera. And then I chose a quote by her. So I would write down the quote as well, just so I can know exactly what I'm putting on my poster. And I would just keep this in my sketchbook. And so that I can kind of look at it as I'm working on my drawing, so that I can remember what I want to be on my poster. So I would put the name, the quote, and then I think I want to have her holding a protest sign. I don't think I want to have her holding the rose, but I think I want to add roses into the background. So once I've kind of decided just the very basic idea of what I want on my poster by taking notes, I can start working on my preliminary sketches. Now, what a preliminary sketch is, it's a practice sketch. If I'm working on like a really big painting, right? I don't want to just go in and start working on it. What if the way that I lay it out doesn't look quite right and I want to change something? I just spent all this time drawing on it. So what I want to do first is figure out exactly how I want my drawing to look, to try out kind of a few different ideas, right? Work with my composition. And remember, composition is how the objects are arranged. So when you're working on a preliminary sketch, it's really important not to be worried about kind of how the drawing looks. These are all really, really, really fast sketches that we're working on. If you look at If you look at, for example, this drawing that I made, this is for a poster that I made in collaboration with the People's Paper Co-op. So if we look at this, I didn't just sit right down and draw this. I spent a long time making really fast, really messy sketches before I started working even on this at all. So I probably did at least 20 sketches just to get my ideas right, just to make sure that my composition looked okay. So when we sit down to do a preliminary sketch, we can use our sketchbook or a piece of paper. And what you can do is you can just kind of take a box, you can just draw a little box. You don't have to fill a whole page with your preliminary sketches. Some people also call these thumbnail sketches because they're little, right? Little like the thumb. So I might just sit down and say, okay, so this is just really rough. Maybe I know I want to have her name up here. So I'll just really quickly write that out. So I know that maybe I want her name up there, and maybe I want to have like her face right in the middle with my quote at the bottom. You can see this sketch looks really messy, but this is the first step. This is kind of like a low stress part of the game where we can make mistakes and just really get our ideas out there and figure out the good composition that we want to use. For example, if I do a thumbnail sketch and I say, okay, maybe I want the text right here, and I want her down here holding the protest sign and her quote right here, you can see that this composition isn't very balanced. And the reason is because there's this whole area up here where there's lots of open space. So that, I would say, is not a good composition. And doing these preliminary sketches helps me kind of figure out where to draw certain areas. And since I'm doing them fast, I don't have to worry about kind of erasing and fixing them. I can just draw a new square and just keep going and try out kind of a new composition. Maybe I want her name going across like that. And maybe she's down here kind of like looking up at her name. It's just a way to just try out different ideas. And if you want to, keep making art, and if maybe you want to be a designer or an illustrator, this is a really great process that you can use in any type of art making, is doing these preliminary sketches. Once I've kind of made a preliminary sketch, and you can see kind of like how silly these are, and I'm not embarrassed by these sketches because these are not the final sketch, right? Once I've kind of figured out the basic composition that I want to use, then I can go in and do a little bit more of a complicated sketch just to kind of try out different ideas and make them a little more fleshed out. So maybe I want to have her kind of name coming up here with her face in the center, or maybe I want to try and, have kind of her name at the top with her holding the protest sign with her quote at the bottom. So this sketch here, this was pretty quick for me, but now I know exactly how I want my drawing to look moving forward. And right now, we're not going to think about color. We're just going to think about getting that just preliminary design, just where all the different elements are going to be. So just to go over again, our first steps are research and brainstorming, figuring out who we're going to make our poster of. We're going to decide on the text we want on our poster, and we're going to do preliminary practice sketches, just with pencil and paper.